Hi folks, my name is Jasmine MacIsaac, a student at Cape Breton University, currently working towards my Bachelor of Arts in Community Studies. And I'd like to welcome you to the Community Action Project podcast. This podcast is part of our Comms 3100 Community Action Project. Through this series, our goal is to create space for frontline workers, people who show up every day to support individuals facing addiction, trauma, housing instability, and other systemic challenges. These workers take on a tremendous amount of emotional labor, often with limited resources or recognition. In today's episode, I'm joined by a community support housing manager who works closely with vulnerable populations, and I want to thank them sincerely for being here and sharing their story. Please note that this episode will touch on themes like emotional stress, systemic gaps, and mental health. If at any point you find the content difficult, it is okay to take a break or reach out for support. Let's get started. Alright, so thanks again for being here today. To start off, could you introduce yourself a little? Maybe not by name, but the kind of work that you take part in?
Okay, so my name is Denise. I deal with an extremely vulnerable population of women, or people that may identify as women. So the population that I deal with are at risk or have been involved with the criminal justice system. So most of the clients are coming out of a federal institution or a provincial institution with nothing. So they're starting from scratch, beginning their lives, sometimes with no support in the community that they're going to.
For sure.
So the trauma that they've had prior to being incarcerated or being at risk of being incarcerated follows them through their healing path. So when they come to us, they haven't dealt with most of the trauma. So that would be the first thing that we would help our clients with, would be dealing with the trauma that they need in order to heal from an addiction, from an abusive situation, or from just life in general. We also need to provide housing, the skills needed to get jobs, the skills needed to find the proper supports, and I guess to live a pro-social life. How to actually live a pro-social life.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us take that for granted because of our upbringings and the way we were introduced to adulthood would be different than somebody else that didn't have the advantages that someone like myself or someone like you would have. So we kind of coach and we support and we just listen. We take on everybody's problems. So when I leave at the end of the day, we kind of have to either try to put that into a drawer or put it on a shelf and forget about it to the next day. Over time, these drawers get too full, the shelves get way too heavy, and we don't have any outlet for ourselves.
For sure.
Right? Being a small organization, or a smaller organization, I guess you should say, or I should say, we just started to integrate mental health into our everyday, I guess, workforce or workplace. So I'll use an example. There was one time I was held at knife point. The first thing that happened after the police took that person away was that our mental health person that works in our society called me and asked me if there was anything that she could do for me. She came up and did a debriefing with myself and with the staff member that was with me. If she hadn't have done that, that would probably be something that I would be carrying still to this day, even though that happened years ago.
For sure.
Right? And I find it very helpful now that I meet with her once a week. I talk to her. I also have somebody outside of work that I speak to, because holding on to these things causes a trauma response, which could in turn make me a client of where I work.
True.
Right? So we have to learn as women and as people to let go of all of these these stories because it's like, I don't know, not taking a shower every day.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't take a shower every day, your body gets weighed down, your hair would be just limp because you're carrying the weight of all that dirt and oil and everything else that, you know, is brought upon you from your surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as working with mental health and addictions. When you're working with people and you're constantly hearing about the trauma and you're constantly hearing about addiction and you're constantly hearing about other people's troubles, it weighs you down.
Mm-hmm.
You need to eventually clean all that off and start over again. By talking to people, taking time for yourself, realizing that self-care is most important when you're in this field is the first and foremost thing that anybody should do.
For sure.
Yes.
So our next question is a little outside what we just talked about, but what inspired you to pursue this line of work?
Well, I was a school teacher for many years. I worked in Alberta in the oil fields. I was coordinator for many projects, made some really big money. At the end of my career in teaching, I coached basketball. I was really big in that. Got into a verbal altercation with a parent that was drinking at one of the basketball games. So I took that really personally. I had to go before the board, the school board, and sit. And when I realized that there wasn't the support that I needed from the school board, they just more or less told me, why are you doing this extra stuff for these kids? You're not getting back anything in return. I said, I really need to find something so that I can do what I need to do. So I did take a pay cut, and I found this job. I applied for it, and I've been doing this now for 6 years, and I feel satisfied at the end of the day. My heart swells when I leave work. Most days. Some days are really difficult, but most days, because I am overseeing so many different cases, I get the successes as well as the people that aren't ready for their success yet.
And that's got to be hard to watch.
Very, very difficult to watch. I've seen people leave us and go right back into their addiction or their old way of life. I have family members myself that have been active in addiction because of trauma responses. I have a daughter that was married and physically abused, and because of that, she has her own trauma responses that I deal with on a daily basis. You know, and it's very difficult to handle.
It's hard to shelf those ones that are at home too.
Definitely hard to shelf those ones. Yeah.
So before we continue, just wanted to remind you that everything that you share today is entirely voluntary and anonymous. Although you've chosen to give up your anonymity, we just wanted to let you know that is able to change as when you need it. You're welcome to skip any questions or stop at any point. Are you comfortable proceeding?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so let's start with something positive. What are some of the most rewarding aspects of your work?
Seeing people reunite with their children. That has got to be the best part of this job. I was going into, I think, the Dollarama in Sydney here, and I ran into a client that I had about 3 years ago. She's working full time. She just bought a home. She has her 3 children back.
Wow.
And she looks amazing.
Wow.
How can I not feel good about that?
Yeah.
You know, she thanked me continuously throughout our conversation. But it wasn't me that did it. It was her being at the right point in her life and going on the right healing path. She just needed a little bit of guidance. And that's where we come in.
And that's amazing, and you couldn't really ask for any more, right?
Absolutely could not.
So on the flip side, in your day-to-day role, what kinds of challenges do you see most often when working with vulnerable populations? And you kind of touched on it a bit, like you're seeing the grief, the trauma response, you're seeing the mental health side of it and how deeply they've been affected and deeply rooted it goes, and it's intergenerational, it's all of these things. What do you find the biggest challenges in supporting them, I would say?
The intergenerational trauma, I'm glad that you brought that up. That was probably one of the most difficult things that I've had to deal with, because I've walked with many of our clients that do come from that background and lost many. That is the most difficult thing. When they walk out your door and you know that this person is going to continue to walk in the same path, and that the chances of them living another year or 5 years or 10 years is probably not possible. That's difficult.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do, no matter how much you talk to them, no matter how many skills you give them, how much support you give them, how many wraparound services you provide. It doesn't make any difference. You know, intergenerational trauma is one of the biggest things that we would deal with, and it's really hard to get past. Now, mind you, we do have a lot of success cases with that, but then we also have women that don't have the intergenerational trauma. They, you know, maybe they were abused, or their dad or their mom were addicts themselves, and it's harder for these people because they don't have the support of family. It's just hard in general watching anybody go through what we watch,
especially as empaths, right? Like, we feel it maybe more than the next.
I take it home with me. Sometimes I go to bed with that much anxiety that I don't sleep.
Yeah, I totally feel you.
Yeah.
So, do you feel like right now in your current role that there's adequate mental health or emotional support available to you?
I'm very fortunate where I work, because I am a manager, and it is available to our workers as well, but I don't think it's as known as it is to us, because I spend a lot more time at the office. But we are offered the mental health days. Yeah. They're very important. I take every one of them. Yeah. We are also given every 3 weeks, I get an additional day off. Yeah. Because of the hours that I put in.
And the workload that you carry.
And the workload that I do carry. Right. Exactly. I'm very fortunate to have 2 people that are above me that get this. They get every bit of it. I go down there, and if I have anything on my mind, I don't mind bringing it to them. They'll tell me, you know, whatever you need, we will provide it for you. If it's time off, or if it's, you know, extra mental health, just let us know. Yeah. I'm very fortunate in that.
That's really good. And so you kind of touched on this as well, like how these challenges within the work affect your own mental health and the workload or your sense of being supported. So, like, these challenges, you say that you need to shelf them and you need to leave them at home, but you still struggle to find the way to actually put it on the shelf and leave it there. Because sometimes it's hard to just leave it. We want to take it home because we feel so strongly for that client or that person or whomever that might be. In the challenges affecting your own mental health, it seems as though you've had a pretty good wrap on how you're able to cope now and how you're able to seek coping mechanisms, which I'm very fortunate for, and I'm thankful that we do have workers that are supported in this way. So we're going to move on to, like, we're going to talk about smaller and close-knit communities, because Cape Breton is one big, small, close-knit community. And I know we're not only speaking from Cape Breton within this project, but we are based in Cape Breton University, so we can touch on that. So privacy and stigma can sometimes make things a lot harder. Have you experienced that, and how does it affect your work?
Certainly I have. Because of where we do live, if I don't know my client, I know their parent or their aunt or their uncle or somebody that belongs to their family. So you have to try to kind of put that on a back burner as well, because you can't, I guess, not that I want to use the word judge, but you can't judge a person by where they come from.
For sure.
Or who they come from.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't like to use that word, but it plays a big role in it. Absolutely. There's nothing that we can do to kind of say, oh, I got to forget that I know her mother.
Exactly.
Or I know her dad, or I know where she comes from. That's why we have such strong policies that we follow, right? Everybody's treated the same. Is that what you were looking for in that question?
Yeah,
Was there a little bit
100%.
more? Yeah.
It was just to kind of touch on, because we are all from kind of very small knit
Yeah.
communities across the project. It's just to touch on that aspect of like, it really does take an impact on you to work in these fields, take on what you're taking on, and go home and go have a barbecue with the
Right.
neighborhood. And
But you can't go to the dollar store. You can't go to Walmart. You can't go anywhere without
because you
running
know
into
everyone.
somebody,
Yes.
right? And they come to you.
Oh yeah.
Right, because we can't approach them.
Yeah.
That's against everything that we believe in, because we have to give them their anonymity, right? But I don't know. It's very difficult to
hard.
live in a small community.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, looking at your role more broadly, what kind of supports and resources do you wish were available but currently are not?
Like I said, I'm very fortunate. Right now, more time off, I think, is something that, we should be provided with, let's do a day in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Let's everybody go to Inverness and spend a day on
Yeah.
the beach. Enjoy the water, which is probably one of the biggest healing things
Yeah.
living in Cape Breton.
100%.
Go sit on the beach and you watch the water,
Mhm.
pick the rocks, pick the shells.
Mhm.
That's so relaxing. Maybe if workplaces did, okay, this week we're going to take 10 workers.
Yeah,
Next week we're
for
going
sure.
to take 10. We're going to have a day. We're going to provide you with lunch. We're going to make you feel special,
Mhm.
because you are. With everything that you do,
Yeah.
you are special. With the people that you help, even the ones that don't follow the right path, eventually they will. So what we do is important, so we should be made to feel more important.
Mhm.
Does that make sense
Yeah,
to you?
100%.
Mhm.
So, if you could recommend one change, and this could be at the policy level, in the workplace, or broadly in the community, what would it be to better support frontline workers like yourself?
Pay.
Pay.
Is huge. I probably make about 30,000 less a year than I would if I was still teaching school, maybe even more.
Yeah.
Benefits, that's another thing. And just being made to feel like you are as special as you are.
That you're actually doing something that's worthwhile.
Yes, because nobody knows about us. We're, I think, Sydney's best kept secret,
Mhm.
right? People should be recognized for what they put into their jobs. We're just as important as that doctor out there that's making 250,000,
Yeah.
because we're saving lives every day.
Just a different way.
Just in a different way. You hear of all this COVID stuff, and nurses and doctors and frontline workers getting all this extra money. We got nothing. We're frontline. If it wasn't for us, everybody that we have would be still in jail, which costs something like $200,000 a year to keep one person in jail. But yet when we get them, we get the bare minimum,
For sure.
right? And that's not by fault of our organizations. That's the government.
It's funding and grants.
It's
There's
funding
not
and grants.
any access to
Right.
accessing those grants and funding that
So
is available.
my fear is young women like you
Mhm.
coming out of university. Most people, I know I did. I had student loans when I came out of university. I did one of my degrees in the States. I did one here. It's difficult to pay those off. You walk away sometime with $60,000. And if you're making $50,000 a year, all you're going to be able to do is live.
Yeah.
You're not going to have that extra money to put on your student loan, or you're not going to have that extra money, to maybe buy a house or save up for a house, or there's nothing extra.
Yeah.
But the work that we do is extra,
Mhm.
right? Like, we do everything. We save lives just like people in the hospital do. So we should be treated the same way.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So, you spoke about the water being a healing path that you use. So, is there anything else that you personally do to cope or care for your own mental health and well-being?
Yeah, so any traumatic event, it's been proven that if you play a game on your phone, Tetris, any block game,
Mhm.
as soon as something traumatic would happen to me, that's That's what I turn to. I'll play a game of that. It blocks the trauma from actually sticking, I guess, is a good way of putting it. So any psychiatrist would probably recommend that when you work in a high trauma job, that this is something you do. I do that.
Yeah, just find a little game on your break.
Just find a game. Well, not that we get breaks.
No, I know what you mean.
But find a game like Tetris that makes you think, and do that, and it blocks that trauma response from sticking with you. Right. Yeah.
So we were just talking about this as well. What would help you feel more seen, quote unquote, and supported, whether by the public, your workplace, or by policymakers?
I don't care about the public. That doesn't bother me.
It's hard to be in the eye of the public within this work field.
Exactly, and I don't need recognition. Sometimes we get the recognition that we don't want in jobs like this, because the cases that we take can be extremely difficult, and people tend to judge when they don't know an entire story, right? I don't know.
I know that one's a broad question, and it is. It kind of is to make you think about it, because you don't even know what that would be like.
No,
right?
Exactly. Yes.
So
right.
That was kind of to just make a point a little bit. So what is something you wish the public better understood about the realities of being a frontline worker?
Well,
the public can mean like your family who doesn't work in the front lines, like we, or maybe not in the same field that we do, and they just don't understand.
I wish that they understood the weight that we carry on our shoulders, the fears that we have. We don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. You know, even with COVID, I'll use that as an example. I worked 60 hours a week during COVID. I didn't have a choice. You know, people just don't understand that we just can't stop, because if we stop helping people. People stay incarcerated. People stay on the streets.
Yeah.
You know, that's not something that I could live with.
No.
Right? We have to continue going. Right now, I was just diagnosed with something, and it's bad. And I'm having a real difficult time with the medications that I'm on, and just getting through every day. But I still do it.
You still show up?
I still show up every day, because if I didn't, who's going to do that? Who's going to help these people? I know that there's tons of workers, but I have a different job than that. Yeah. Right? I need to be able to do what I'm doing.
There's very few of you in your section of the company, right? So it is a lot harder.
It is.
Within a managerial position, especially. Yes. You're carrying essentially the weight of the
where most people, if they were diagnosed with what I have, would be off work right now.
Exactly.
And taking the time to themselves.
To heal.
Sleeping when they can, and eating when they can. We can't do that.
No.
We still take the calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. I still get the emails at, 1 o'clock. And first thing I do when I wake up in the morning, it's almost like a trauma response. I have to open my phone and I have to check my email just to make sure that everything the night before was okay. Because if I don't do that, then I don't know what I'm going to be bombarded with when I walk through the doors.
Yeah.
Right? Is there, going to be somebody that's hurt, or is there going to be somebody that's gone to prison, or something could happen?
Yeah. Yeah, you never know what you're walking into.
You never know what you're walking into.
So, before we end our conversation, is there anything else you would like to share with us? Anything that you think is important for this conversation, or for those in leadership maybe to hear?
Like I said to you before, I'm very fortunate. The leaders that I have, they listen to me. They're very, very good. Like I said, they've all worked in the same position that I'm in, so they know where I'm coming from. I would like the government to pay more attention. I think that we should be paid like a government worker, because we are funded by different government agencies.
Yeah.
That's imperative. What happens with us is we'll get young women like you that will come and they'll work in our society, and then you go find something better, because you can't live off of what you make with us.
Yeah.
Because we can't offer you that money. So
Yeah.
we're a stepping stone. That would be a really big deal if the government could step in and maybe help us that way.
Yeah.
But as for, like I said, I'm very fortunate. My bosses are great, you know, and I think I'm lucky.
Yeah.
But I would love to see more people that are young get involved in things like this, help people, stop judging. You know, the world is what we make it.
Yep, erase your bias.
It really is. And you don't know what the person standing next to you has endured. So you don't know why they're an addict, why they can't handle change in their life, or why the things that happened to them happened.
Yeah.
Sit and listen. You'll find out. You'll change your tune. It's a great line of work to be in. To be a frontline worker is very... I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it, but we're not looked upon as that, but we are frontline workers. And I'm proud of what I do, and even though I don't tell everybody what my position is and where I actually work, I think it's important that I love what I do, right?
Yeah.
And you use the word empath before,
Yeah.
right? I am an empath, and I think that more people in this world are, but they just don't know how to use it.
They don't want to feel it.
They don't want to feel it.
It hurts.
It makes you vulnerable.
Yes.
Right?
Right? And then you become, within your population, you feel too close.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if we erase our bias, if we erase our judgment, we might be able to take a few steps in the right direction.
Exactly.
All right, well, thank you so much, Denise. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time to participate in our podcast. And I wish you a good day.